started in Tunisia, it actually started in Bolivia.
The process in the Arab countries, I would say that of course it started there, but this process is not a process only there. It's a process that goes worldwide. There is a change, and if you see what happened in Egypt, it's not that there was a political party that organized and that planned everything. No. It was really an explosion from the youth, especially from the people that have no job, no food. And of course, then you have different political parties that come together, but that comes really from the grassroots. That was the same case in the side of Bolivia. President Evo Morales doesn't have in reality a party. His political party are the organizations that have been built by the social movements, by the indigenous people through the last decades in our country. It's really a very strong grassroots movement.
That brings me then to the last set of questions that I want to ask you, which is, and you've worked a lot on this case of integration in Latin America. And what I want to ask you is 2 or 3 things. Firstly, we noticed that there was a wind of change, which was, in American terminology, leftist. That there was socialist movements coming up in Latin America. Were they because of the great gap between the very rich and the very poor? Was it because the very poor had no jobs and no access to money and therefore felt that it was injustice that was being perpetrated on them? What were the reasons for the changes which took place in a number of countries in Latin America? And my interest is in knowing your analysis of what is going to happen in the future in Latin America. What is the picture of Latin America 5 years, 10 years from today?
I can answer the first part of your question. For the last part, I am not a magician, but I can try some things. Well, the first part, what happened in Latin America? Bolivia, for example, was the first, you say, student pupil from the Washington Consensus. We did everything that the Washington Consensus did we had to do. We privatized all our state companies. Before we had a gas and oil state company, we had a railroad company. We all privatized everything. You know what's happening now in Europe. Social security is being cut, salaries are being reduced, people are being thrown into the streets in order to solve the issue of the fiscal deficit. Well, that story, we know it in Latin America. That's what happened in Bolivia and in Latin America during the last 20 years, since 1980 until 2000. And that process, when it began, for example, in the case of Bolivia, they said, well, let's have a smaller state and let's trust that once the private sector comes in, the welfare is going to be distributed by the whole population and everybody is going to have its share. So, in Bolivia, this process began in 1985. And everything was privatized. We went into a process of free market. And after 20 years, you had what you said. The rich became richer and fewer, and the poor became more poor, and there were more people living in poverty. So that is the real cause of this process of change. In some cases, you have more leftist, more moderate, more progressive, but now, no matter with whom you speak in Latin America, even governments that have a position that you would say are more from the right, they are going to be very cautious in relation to what we call neoliberalism. Nobody's going to say that's the solution. We all know what happened. So everybody knows that this has to change, and the change has begun in Latin America. The problem of Latin America will depend very much on the process of integration, as you said. If we manage to, what we have in UNASUR, the United Nations of South America, that now its treaty has come into force just a couple of months ago, if this begins to be a reality and develops in a faster way than what happened with the European Union, because we need to advance faster than the European Union. If the process of integration inside UNASUR develops, then I would say we are going to be able to change the future of Bolivia and the region. I don't see that we can change the future of Bolivia if we don't change the future of South America. We have to have more and more policy of development that sees the region as a whole. Just one example. For example, we want to guarantee that there is food security inside Bolivia. So we decide to give subsidies, give loans, credits to produce sugar. And we managed to have sugar at low cost inside Bolivia. But suddenly, if in Brazil the price of sugar becomes higher, then our sugar, instead of going into our population, begins to be smuggled outside. So we are only going to be able to deal with this kind of issues if there is a process of real and concrete integration. So the future depends on that. And it is very important to strengthen that.
Thank you. I'm going to request the Provost to open the debate to the floor. But before doing that, I just want to tell you that there is a very large number of diplomats from the United Nations in this audience. I don't know whether they have come here because they are interested in quinoa or whether they are interested in coca. But they have been listening to you with very great, and they, as you can see, some of them are taking careful notes. The floor is yours, Mr. Provost.
Thank you, Ambassador. We do have time for a few questions this evening, so if you'd raise your hand, if you'd come down the aisle, please.
Ambassador Solôn, hi. My name is Elizabeth. I'm a student here. I just had a question. You said, Ambassador Kamal said that you had a foundation named after you, the Solôn Foundation. What exactly does that foundation do?
Okay, my father was a very important muralist painter. His name is Walter Solón Romero. He is something like, if you know the muralist painters of Mexico, like Siqueiros, like Diego de Rivera. So the foundation is on behalf of him. The main issue of the foundation is to preserve its art and its work, but also its thoughts, because he was always a socialist artist. And he always said we have to change the reality through art. And he was always committed to the social movement. So that is what this Solón Foundation does. And we in the Solón Foundation, I'm not engaged anymore there since the last 5 years, but the Solón Foundation now develops itself not only in promotion